Good morning. Good morning and welcome to SIDA. My name is Tru Shedvin. I'm heading the unit for Global Sustainable Economic Development here at SIDA. And I have the honor and great pleasure to open this unique day at SIDA on the important, extremely important topic of smallholder and indigenous-led action to the crisis on climate, food, and biodiversity. Extremely happy to see you all here. I'm very happy to be able to have this in real-life events again. So very, very warm welcome. Let me start by thanking SIANI, Agribusiness, Forest and Farm Facility, We Effect, Tenure Facility, Rights and Resources, Swedbio, Focali, V Agroforestry for taking this initiative and for organizing this important event jointly with us at SIDA today. This is a day for knowledge development, dialogue, and networking. We have gathered so much expertise and knowledge in this day here at SIDA. It's a great and fantastic opportunity to share and develop knowledge and network. Coming together and sharing, jointly reflecting, is crucial for us to find sustainable solutions in this critical time, and also to see what role each and every one of us can take to handle this crisis and these challenges that we are faced with. What brings us together today are these huge challenges that I don't need to describe to anyone in this audience. But what also brings us together and makes this possible is the Plus 50 conference that starts tomorrow and endures for 2 days, and that gathers all of these key actors here in Stockholm for this week. 50 years ago, the UN, together with the government of Sweden, organized the first global conference on the human impact on the environment. The United Nations Conference on the Human Environment, its motto, Only One Earth, teamed with an iconic image of planet Earth as seen from the moon, inspired all over the world. The purpose of Stockholm Plus 50 conference is to look back at these issues, the global policy processes, the institutions that have been created as a result, and take stock of where we are today. And this day at SIDA is also an important part of this process and this conference. What we have seen is also that the COVID-19 pandemic and the consequences of the pandemic have made several of these, the food, the climate, even more acute. It's an acute crisis. And especially also now when we have the double effect from the war in Ukraine, not least on the food insecurity. This also reveals the weaknesses in the underlying systems and structures. IFAD concluded in a recent publication that global food systems are failing in being fair, green, and sustainable. The UN Food Systems Summit in 2021 also called for a transformation of the world's food systems so that they deliver adequate, nutritious diets for all. So for today, it's important that we discuss how we can meet the acute challenges, but also to keep the long-term perspective and have a look at opportunities and for sustainable solutions that actually changes the underlying systems and structures. And I believe the program, especially the first event, challenges us to keep those two perspectives, both the acute and the long term, and making sure that we together can look at sustainable solutions that changes things in the fundamental. Another important perspective is the leaving no one behind, that we are all very familiar with. And at SIDA, we have poor people's perspective at the very heart of all of what we do. And this is even more important in the situation that we are in now and the developments that we see. And therefore, I'm very happy that the program takes the perspective of smallholder farmers and indigenous people. Let me end by saying again that I'm extremely delighted to welcome you to SIDA today and to listen to the experiences from Farmer and Forest Association, indigenous people, local communities, youth and women in tackling climate, food and biodiversity challenges. My hope is that today will constitute an important platform for continued dialogue, continued discussions on sustainable solutions. I look forward to very interesting discussions. Thank you. And I'm handing over to Emma, my dear colleague.
Thank you so much, True. And welcome all of you also from me. Emma Norstad-Tickner. I work as a program manager at the Unit for Global Sustainable Economic Development here at SIDA. And I'm the program manager in charge for many of the partners that we will see here today. To give you a little bit of appetite for the day, I would like to invite the 3 moderators for each event to say a short, to give a snapshot of each event. Please, Negendo, Anna, and Alain.
Hi. For the first event, which is dubbed the Global Food Crisis, is it a threat or an opportunity for young smallholder farmers and agripreneurs? This event will focus on how we can build the capacity of agripreneurial youth and how we can enable them to take on the challenges to feed a projected 9.7 billion people by 2050 in a sustainable manner. And this need has been intensified with the COVID pandemic and the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. I hope you can stay for the event. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Anna Bolin. I'm a program manager here at SIDA at the Unit for Global Cooperation on the Environment. So for the second event today, from the ground up, channeling financing to smallholder forest and farm producers for the full spectrum of climate action, is an event that will focus on some of these key actors, these organizations that are the real game changers on the ground in terms of not only implementing diverse food systems, production systems, and also conserving biodiversity, but also responding to other social and economic needs of their communities. So we invite you for the second event as well, which is jointly organized between the Forest and Farm Facility, which is a global partnership, as well as We Affect, which is a Swedish non-governmental organization with also roots in the cooperative movement. So very welcome. That is 1:15, I believe.
After lunch.
After lunch, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Alain Fréchette, and I'm with the Rights and Resources Initiative. And I'll be moderating an exciting panel this afternoon at 3. It will feature the role and importance of indigenous peoples and local communities in safeguarding the world's lands, forests, and ecosystems, and how support for their land rights and agency can actually accelerate global transformation towards a more just, resilient, and sustainable future. It's again, a high-level event. It features speakers from the Tenya facility, SIDA, Swedbio, and rights holders. So we really invite you to come and join us for this interesting discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We hope that you can stay for all 3 events today. There will also be opportunities for networking, mingling. There will be food and coffee, and we hope to be hosting you for the whole day. Without further ado, please welcome up to the stage Negendo, the moderator for the first event, and the panelists.
Thank you. I was actually going to ask whether it's appropriate to clap, but I appreciate the claps. I didn't introduce myself well earlier. I was just giving a little snippet. So my name is Ngendo Mashua. I work for the Stockholm Environment Institute as a communications officer. And I support this lovely program, AgriForce 2030, stands for Agriculture for Food Security. And this event is co-hosted by the Swedish International Agricultural Network Initiative, also known as SIANI. And in today's event, we are going to have a really great panel. When you talk about youth, we believe youth is a way of doing things. You know how, like, in a company, they have like a digital department that handles things? For us, youth is a way of doing things. We involve youth in everything that we do. We don't just put them aside and listen to them. For us, they have a voice in our program. So we're going to discuss how we can enable these young agripreneurs, and we are very lucky to have a Swedish agripreneur and one who's come all the way from Kenya, and we'll hear from a wider range of speakers. We have Elizabeth Nsimadala, we have Dr. Kalibata online, and Asem, who's joining us virtually. So it's a really packed event, and I believe everyone has been given some handouts with more information on who the speakers are. You can read more about them, get their titles right, and we encourage you to engage online. On our Twitter channels, you can tag @SIANI Agri, using the hashtags @AdayAtSida and hashtag Stockholm+50. So I don't want to take much of your time, so I'll just hand over straight to Dr. Agnes Kalibata, who is joining us online. She is the president at AGRA and the UN Secretary General Special Envoy for the 2021 Food System Summit. Fun fact, she's my immediate former boss. So over to you, Dr. Kalibata.
Thank you, Ngendo, and thank you for that fun fact. Let me start by appreciating the people that have brought us here today, SIDA and the Stockholm Environmental Institute and SIANI, for really getting us at a time when we need to be having these important conversations. The whole conversation here around the global food crisis and what it means to young people in ag, but also to agripreneurs, is an extremely important conversation. If you live in East Africa on the equator like I do, since 2014, you're definitely aware of the challenges that we live through in the agriculture sector, whether it's the droughts that we see every day, whether it's the floods now that are becoming real in some of Southern African countries, or whether it is the locusts and fallen worm invasions that happened, some of them for the first time, and locusts in 20 years, the most grave in 20 years. But also now the food crisis immediately after COVID-19, and COVID-19 really impacted SMEs in ways that in Africa is very different from many other places, because we didn't have a backup system that was coming in to provide the type of support they needed to be able to stay alive. And that's the core of being an SME in the agriculture sector, and a sector that is primarily considered risky. And because of what is happening, the increasing rate of risk in the sector itself, it becomes extremely difficult to be an SME and to survive in that environment, especially if you're a young SME that has great ideas, because that's what our youth have, that has great ideas, that has great initiative, that is ready to start something, but is struggling with growth, because the biggest challenge our youth businesses have in the agricultural sector is growth and access to finance. So that is struggling with growth and access to finance. So for me, what I see as the biggest risk of all this is the fact that a sector that was already considered risky becomes even riskier and perceived even riskier, such that setting up business in this sector becomes challenging. When the UN Secretary General launched the Food System Summit, it was recognizing the challenges, the interconnected challenges that the sector faces. And we went out, we used the opportunity to reach billions of people, in fact, and millions of youth. And youth did take the challenge and did engage, right? Whether it is how they led alongside action tracks, whether it is how they organized themselves and reached out to deeper youth all over the world, including indigenous youth, including youth from all walks of life. We were really surprised and amazed at how well they organized, and really even taking that organization and engagement from the Food System Summit and taking it over to COP26, where their voice was very clear and very strong. Now, what is at stake here is for businesses to survive in the agricultural sector, which is extremely important for young people. In Africa here, 70% of the people are below 35. That is typically a youth, right? So for them to get employment in this sector, it's going to have to be that we really find ways of doing things better. And let me just mention a few things that we need to be doing differently. We have a lot of initiatives in the agriculture sector across the continent and in the youth sector across the continent and probably many other places. One of the things that I think would be extremely important would be coordinating better. These initiatives need to coordinate, these initiatives need to be aligned, and these initiatives need to complement each other, speak to each other. So it's just, when any country you look at and you ask yourself, so what's happening in the youth sector? It's just amazing how much is being done already. So that's number one. Number two, working with governments to ensure that there's an enabling environment that allows youth to be available, including putting in place facilitation mechanisms for access to land. Land markets need to be developed, for access to finance, and for improving the infrastructure, especially rural infrastructure, so that youth can have access to things like energy and internet, which is really what they need to be able to create jobs in those places. But let me conclude with a point around women and women youth and women in business. We do have a challenge, the fact that there's a gap already between how women are engaging in business. We see a 10% gap, even though women are the majority of people in ag. The gap when it comes to businesses, we see 10% less engagement of women than men, and we do see a 34% gap in production, mostly because access to most of the things they need to be having the same level of yield are not as easily accessible to them, or in terms of capital, they don't have as much capital. So there's even a more intentional engagement that is needed when it comes to engaging the youth women in businesses. And we have created a program called Value for Her that is really to facilitate and support women to ensure that they have access to these facilities. And of course, all that said, at the end of the day, indigenous people and with young men and young women have even much less and limited access than the ones we see in these other walks of life. So I think we have a challenge in our midst to ensure that the sector becomes interesting, becomes attractive, but most importantly, we really need to ensure that we are doubling down on making sure that the resources that are needed to make the sector attractive to young people so that we can create jobs happen. It is a global challenge. This is not just an African challenge. When we have 70% of African population as young people, this definitely is a global challenge. And I think there's an opportunity for all of us to work together through what initiatives that we are talked about under the Food Systems Summit, to find ways of engaging and to find ways of reaching out to youth with information, with access, with everything they need so that they can be part of moving the sector forward. The biggest opportunities, they are prepared to work with us to move the sector forward. And we should take advantage of their energy and their skills and their interest and agility. So thank you for giving me the opportunity. I look forward to having a conversation around how we can enhance youth engagement in the agriculture sector here in Africa and across the world, and keep them engaged in the food systems as we saw them engaged during the Food Systems Summit. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kalibata, for those wise nuggets. And before I move on to the next speaker, we did ask all speakers to share with us a special message that they might have for Stockholm Plus 50, and I'll just read out Dr. Kalibata's message. The time we are living in with multiple recurrent crises should not make us forget that the biggest threat is climate change. We all need to seize the opportunity to rally behind the call of Stockholm Plus 50 for a healthy planet, for the prosperity of all, our responsibility, our opportunity. This directly follows the commitment we made at the 2021 Food Systems Summit to meet the SDGs by 2030 for people, planet, and prosperity. Now I want to introduce our keynote speaker, who is Ms. Elizabeth Nsimadala, the President of the Eastern Africa Farmers Federation and the Director of Women Affairs at the Pan-African Farmers Organization. Elizabeth, welcome.
Thank you so much, Ngeno. Dear colleagues, Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, colleagues, all protocols observed. Many thanks to all the organizers of a day at SIDA for really inviting me to give a keynote address at this very important event on the global food crisis, looking at it as a threat or opportunity for young smallholder farmers and agripreneurs. I've already been introduced by our moderator, but once again, for emphasis purposes, I'm Elizabeth Nsimadara. I'm a young smallholder and agripreneur, Ugandan, the president of the Eastern Africa Farmers Federation, but also the director in charge of women affairs at the Pan-Africa Farmers Organization level, and the immediate past president. So I bring you greetings from both the Eastern Africa Farmers Federation and the Pan-Africa Farmers Organization, where we represent over 80 million smallholder farmers from 50 countries of Africa. And at the Eastern Africa level, 10 countries, over 25 million smallholder farmers. So it's really a great pleasure and honor for me to be with you today. And thanks to the possibility to hold in-person meeting. It's been indeed a long journey of uncertainties since the year 2020. And many things that you're all aware of have happened globally. Of course, where in addition to the pandemic that has already been mentioned by my sister, Dr. Agnes, the world population is still growing. We need to acknowledge that. And we in Africa, the urbanization is rapid. The majority youth are also involved in rural-urban migration for greener pastures. Our economies, as you are well aware, are the fast growing in the world. And the climate change impacts are quickly catching up with us. We need to rise up from our laurels. We should make green climate finance accessible to millions of farmers. Accessing these funds need to stop being a puzzle. We are gradually growing in resilience to COVID-19 as the world opens up. However, a new pandemic necessitated by the Ukraine war is starting to cripple the gains and is creating untold tensions in access to food, in disruption of supply chains, in increased cost of living, loss of employment, and the world youth bubble is about to burst. It is important that we keep reflecting on all the many moving parts as a sum of all challenges. But most importantly, we need to follow through the decisions that we make. Otherwise, the many challenges we are currently facing will continue piling up and spillover will be hard to contain. This spillover could be in any form. It could be in increased world hunger, in unwarranted and forced immigrations, in civic disobedience, in the outbreak of more and several pandemics, in the significant strain on provision of services, the high level of corruption, deterioration of human rights, and many others. So we need to understand that youth are an integral part of sustaining our food systems. It's important to note that they are a crucial actor in determining the character and the future of our agriculture. Globally, they share an almost similar profile when it comes to education and production. You have shown decreasing interest when it comes to technology and mining of information. The youth are advanced in terms of practice, in terms of adoption and innovation. And when it comes to markets, they are influencing consumption patterns and product development. Having said that, we have had many sessions to discuss youth engagement in agriculture food systems, and we have many ideas and proposals on this. What we now need is action. We need action, and I want to emphasize that. We need to package and link them with bankable opportunities. while ensuring that we de-risk them so that they are able to engage. Some of the actions that we need to act on quickly may include ensuring that we provide a platform through which the youth can participate in the food systems dialogue by being active contributors to the process and implementers of the decisions. At the Eastern Africa Farmers Federation, we engage the youth to discuss and contribute to consultations leading to the producer position at Food Systems Summit. We have also developed a digital platform in partnership with Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, where we engage youth from the region, and they are able to share and have access to information and opportunities through the Africa Youth in Agribusiness platform, or the AYA platform. We also need to provide a mechanism where the youth are able to prioritize their value chains of interest. Our experience shows that youth have value chains that they are always interested in. We also need to support them with supportive capacities, be it information. We need to identify trainers, mentors, business partnership linkages, and any other supporting and enabling ecosystems. At EF, we conducted studies to identify opportunities that exist in public and private spaces. We identified potential capacity to support business development. And this we did through investment pitching and fundraising. We also supported matchmaking and establishment of partnership that can support them through mentorship. We also need to ensure that the existing policies support youth endeavors in many countries. We have paid lip service to developing such youth-friendly policies within the region. The biggest challenge for youth exists in access to resources. Finance and land are very critical. We hope that in the area of Green Fund, we can have a specific fund set aside as affirmative action that can easily be accessed by the youth. There's need to work with farmer organizations to mobilize youth in agriculture, to help them set up formidable organizations, and link them to various global and continental thematic discussions, support their advocacy work at all levels, and assist them to build mutually reinforcing partnerships. I shall be giving more specifics of some of the work that we are doing in terms of supporting the youth during the panel discussion that is going to happen shortly. So I therefore urge all the participants today to help us arrive at decisions that are practical and implementable. Let's listen to the youth leaders who are here today with us and incorporate their propositions in the final decisions. Let us also ensure that we hold ourselves accountable for proposals that we shall make. Let us remember that we shall get the food systems we deserve if we fail to take any positive action for the future. The future belongs to the youth. Any discussions concerning tomorrow should have young people on the table. Otherwise, the next generation will never forgive us for messing the future. I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And you did read out your quote at the end there. And allow me to just add one word, that the future belongs to the youth, and any discussions concerning today and tomorrow should have young people on the table. Otherwise, the next generation will never forgive us for messing the future. Do you agree? Today and tomorrow. Remember to engage with us online at SIANI Agri using the hashtags @AdayAtSida and Stockholm50. Without much further ado, I want to introduce a young entrepreneur, and you can read about her in the handout. She's from my hometown, Kenya, my home country. So I'll welcome on stage Tracy Kimathi, who's the CEO and founder of Baridi, and she'll tell us more about this company, what they do, and how she has been able to overcome the challenges that have been thrown her way. Welcome, Tracy.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. My name is Tracy Kimathi. I'm the founder of Baridi, And in Kiswahili, baridi actually means cold, and I'll explain to you what that means. Back in 2018, I had the pleasure to visit the Masai Mara, which is a beautiful rangeland in Kenya that holds various indigenous populations, one being the Maasai. Now, the Maasai are a pastoralistic communities whose livelihoods have been affected by climatic conditions like drought and locust infestations. Now, my company, along with 3 other young, innovative entrepreneurs, came together, sat down, and thought about a quite simple innovation, which is called a solar-powered cold room. It is simply a technology that utilizes the most abundant resource in Africa, which is the sun, to preserve the most neglected livelihood, which is meat preservation. Now, over the years, I have been able to learn from pastoralists. I have been able to see what they need on a daily basis, and I can come here and I can really introduce you guys to a model that we find affordable to introduce, and not only affordable but profitable, because that's what young people, as Dr. Kalibata said, are aiming to achieve in Africa, to build innovative models that are profitable. So what we do is we enable something called a pay-as-you-chill model. So we enable these pastoralists who live with about $5 a day to be able to preserve their very valuable economies by paying as they go for an innovative solar solution. Energy in Africa is quite up and down. So we introduce solar so that we can have efficient technology. We introduce lithium-ion batteries so that when the sun is not shining, unlike here in Stockholm, where it shines from 9 p.m. to 9 a.m., we introduce lithium-ion high-quality battery systems that can also basically calibrate those. And within our short introduction of the technologies, we saw that one of the other elements, or rather markets, that need these the most are the urban markets. So we come to realize that there are things called open markets here back in Nairobi, back in Africa. Most people who buy fruit, vegetable, livestock, they don't do it in supermarkets. They go into this open market environments where you see a mother, or a child selling these, commodities, and we introduce these technologies to them. So basically, to date, we've been able to achieve quite a lot within what we have been able to develop. We've been able to, since December of 2021, when we introduced our very first unit within an urban market, we've been able to preserve over 60,000 kilograms of meat. We've been able to generate over 1,300 kilowatt hours of solar PV generated, which equates to about 600 kgs of CO2 equivalent avoided within the systems. So you can see that over 700 meat vendors have utilized our systems, and because we are affordable and because we're innovative, we get to introduce these technologies over and over again to markets that actually need them. So basically, since we're here to talk about the Stockholm 50+ conference, I would like to ask, what have you done in the last 50 years to ensure a healthy and productive planet? Well, I'll tell you what I and a group of young, innovative Kenyan entrepreneurs have done in 6 months. We are tackling climate change by introducing, again, the solar chillers that aid in preserving meat produce within pastoralistic communities whose livelihoods are extremely devastated by climate change. Can the Stockholm 50+ delegates match these efforts by introducing much-needed cold chain within semi-arid regions, not only of Africa, but in the global as well? We're tackling the pollution crisis by introducing solar, within these markets, by actively reducing post-slaughter meat losses that inevitably reduces cattle production, thus actively reducing methane emissions. So we're not only looking at CO2 equivalent avoidance by introducing these technologies, we're also introducing methane reductions, because if you lose quarter of a cow, then that means another one is slaughtered. We try and evade as much losses as we can by introducing these cold rooms, and we actively reduce the amount of methane that is produced. Within 6 months, again, of our operation, our very first chiller, again, we have been able to preserve over 70,000 kilograms of meat and avoided over 600,000 kgs of CO2 emissions. So my message to the Stockholm 50+ delegation would be in line with the theme. In my line of work, responsibility means enabling vulnerable communities like the semi-arid pastoralists of the Masai Mara with technologies that could dramatically help combat drought and locust infestations. These technologies should be relatively innovative, but be existing solutions to existing problems. One area that I've come to realize is people who are trying to solve food security problems are always trying to come up with newer innovation, and yet solar irrigation, solar cold rooms, things that tend to look very non-innovative are non-existent in these food deficit areas. And this types of something as simple as a drip irrigation system, it might seem very menial. You might go to an investor and say that they're not innovative, but these are actually the type of technologies that are required within our ecosystems. So other than introducing the existing solutions, again, like solar irrigation, solar cooling, solar drying, solar desalination, the Stockholm 50+ delegates should address the expansion of off-grid solar within these food industries, basically. Again, this is because of the depreciation and appreciation of energy within Africa. Sometimes energy is abundant, sometimes it's not. Once we utilize renewable energy, that tends to have, benefiting factors that would be quite helpful. And again, within the neglected livestock value chain, again, delegates really need to introduce infrastructures within beef and dairy ecosystem as an appropriate, beneficial, and financially viable application as a driver of food security in livestock value chains. Thank you.
Before you go, Tracy, I see we are good on time. We have 5 minutes. I just want to ask you one question.
Please.
How has COVID-19 plus the ongoing war in Russia and Ukraine impacted your business?
Yeah, so actually my story on COVID-19 was more positive than anything else. We were able to pivot our business model by simply sitting and reanalyzing. I was just sorry, I don't know if that's a good thing, but a lot of companies pivoted, used the time to actually learn more within their companies and pivoted. That's what we did. We pivoted from providing solar off-grid electrification to providing a more sustainable solution with solar cold rooms. I know that's not maybe something that people want to hear, but COVID-19 did give entrepreneurs a time to sit down and actually analyze their businesses. For the Ukraine, maybe we're too far to feel
the impact hasn't reached Africa yet.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's my honest answer.
That's good.
Thank you.
If COVID-19 was an opportunity, then it's just facts, right? Yeah. All right. She did read out her message to the Stockholm Plus 50 conference, so I won't repeat that. I want to invite Dr. Jenna Senecal, the CEO of Sanitation 360, who has a very interesting solution in her company, and I'll just let her speak about it. Welcome, Jenna.
Thank you. Thank you. So to start, I need to give you a little bit of context as to why a sanitation company is standing up here and pretending, I can change the slide, pretending to be an agripreneur. So I am an agripreneur, and it starts with the fact that all of us are going to the bathroom multiple times a day, and we're producing 1.5 liters of urine and 200 to 300 grams of feces, a fun fact that you can take home to trivia night now. And for us, that excreta are managed as a waste. And for 20% of the global municipal wastewater, that excreta does go to a wastewater treatment plant. The rest does not. So as you can imagine, it's contributing to the spread of disease and leading to over 800,000 preventable deaths every year. On top of that, only 7% of our municipal wastewater goes to a wastewater treatment plant that actually effectively removes the pollutants like nitrogen and phosphorus before it's released into surface waters. What does that mean? We're contributing, just going to the bathroom, we are contributing to the algae blooms, or eutrophication, and dead zones, or hypoxia, what we have in our surface waters in Sweden, and including the Baltic Sea, and throughout the world. And it is true that Sweden is contributing to this as well. So if we look at the amount of anthropogenic nitrogen that we release into the environment, agriculture, which we're aware of as a polluter, contributes just over 40%. What we don't acknowledge is that us going to the bathroom in Sweden is contributing to almost 30% of the nitrogen that we're releasing. That's 15,000 tons of nitrogen, and then phosphorus and other pollutants. So why is that? Well, it starts at the field, where we apply fertilizer that contains nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, etc. The plants grow and take up these compounds. We harvest these plants, and then we eat them. And as adults, we don't retain these compounds. We have a net balance. So quite literally, we are what we eat, and what we eat is what we excrete. And in our excreta are the exact same compounds that we use to grow our food. And that's why I argue that we should not be managing our excreta as a waste, but we need to start managing it as a fertilizer. And the potential is huge. So this figure is giving an overview of not just urine, but of wastewater, and the potential of replacing the global fertilizer demand with our human excreta. And you can see there's potential for up to between 6 to 18%, depending on the compound. And we don't reach 100%, because from the field, there's losses, and then every step of the way until we actually get to consume it, there's losses of nutrients. And we need to work within that entire service chain in order to effectively manage the natural resources that we're working with. And that's what Sanitation 360 is doing. We focus on taking urine, specifically because it contains 80% of the polluting compounds that we have in our wastewater, and we convert it into a solid product that can be used with conventional farming equipment. I can pass these around, you can open it, you can smell it. This is from our project that we have on Gotland, where we collect the urine and process it into a solid fertilizer. And so as you can see, by building this circular economy, we're actually helping the sanitation sector and helping the ag sector. And that's what we're all about. And so to answer the question as to how COVID has impacted us, it was the same for us. It was a positive thing. All of a sudden, it was acceptable to have digital meetings. Like today, it's a hybrid meeting. And so we were able to network, attend conferences, and collaborate on levels that we would not have been able to before, because as a startup, we don't have the funds to go travel around the world, but all of a sudden we could do this, and our global reputation has grown, and thanks to that. We're also fortunate to be based in Sweden, where we did not have lockdowns, and where our set activities that we already had the funding for were able to run as planned. In terms of how the looming food crisis is impacting us, again, it's positive for me. The messages that I'm trying to convey are things that people never think about. Majority of people, who thinks about wastewater treatment plants and what happens after you flush the toilet? Not many of us. So when I go to pitch to investors, I have to get across the fact that we have to care about what's happening on the toilet, and we also have to care about the ag sector. And it's very difficult concepts to get across. So the fact that now in the media we have fertilizer prices going up, food prices going up, where do we get our fertilizer? What's the future? All of a sudden, when I show this graph, it clicks. Investors go, hell yeah, I support this, let's go. So in a nutshell, Sanitation 360 is working within both of these sectors and trying to enable a circular economy so that we can tackle both of these problems together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want me to stay up? Or look at it?
No, that was spot on. I've never thought about all this. In Africa, it's taboo to talk about such things, but if it's offering a good solution, I'm here for it. So well done. I hope the tube is going round. Whoever is smelling it, all the best. But I'm sure it's good. And I'm just thinking, I'm soon approaching exiting the youth bracket. And I'm just thinking, if we had all these ideas scaled up, imagine where we would be as a world. We just need to listen and support all these fantastic ideas that are coming out from the young people. So next up, we have Dr. Assem Abu Hatab, who is joining us virtually. He's a professor in food and development economics at SLU and also a senior researcher at the Nordic Africa Institute. So he's joining us virtually, and we will soon be connecting to him. Welcome, Dr. Assem.
Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. Yes, sure. Now I have shared my screen. Can you see my screen? Okay. I assume you see my screen. So yeah, again, good morning, everyone. And it's a very pleasure to be here with you today and to share some insights from our ongoing research at the Nordic Africa Institute on the impact of the ongoing Russian-Ukrainian war on food systems in Africa. So I will be focusing today on two items: why the conflict matters and how it matters for food systems in Africa. Of course, when we talk about food systems, we by default are talking about youth, especially when we talk about African countries. Youth constitute a significant share of Africa's current and projected future population. So, you know, by default, what I'm going to talk about today is related to the future of youth in agriculture and food sectors. The contemporary food supply chains are globalized systems. They constitute of multiple networks between actors, organizations at different levels, from local, national, regional, and international levels, and they are composed of subsystems, farming system, input supply system, market, and waste management systems. The food systems also interact with other systems, such as the health system, the energy system. So a structural change in the food system might originate from another system. For example, policies that promote biofuel production in the energy system will also have a significant impact on food system. The same thing, this geopolitical conflict taking place thousands of miles away from Africa will also likely to have profound impact on food systems in the continent. So the invasion of Ukraine in February this year emerged as an additional shock to Africa's food systems that threatens to exacerbate food security challenges and to derail national and global efforts aiming to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. So let me just change my slide. So based on the research that we are conducting at the Nordic Africa Institute, two dimensions explain the worrying impacts of the invasion on Africa's food systems. The first dimension is related to when, or the timing of the conflict, which takes place at the time when food supply chains in Africa are still struggling or trying to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic, which added 130 million undernourished people worldwide. Around 40 million of them are located in Africa. The World Bank estimates show that the pandemic has increased the proportion of Africans who are food stressed or who are in food crisis by 30%. In addition to that, and one of the previous speakers has referred to the locust infestation, which added 22 million people and make them food insecure in the Horn of Africa. So the timing dimension is very important. The second dimension here is where, and it has to do with the parties involved in this conflict. The two countries, Russia and Ukraine, are major players in the international market for agricultural and food commodities. They are responsible for around 12% of global calories traded worldwide, around 1/4 of wheat exports, 1/5 of maize and barley, and around 2/3 of sunflower oil exports. That's very important for African countries, which import 40% of their food needs from the international market, and especially wheat. I mean, most of African countries rely on Russia and Ukraine on their wheat imports. Some countries, such as Egypt, imports 85% of its food needs from Russia. So the ongoing war will have a significant impact on the food. In addition to that, we have identified 4 pathways through which the conflict threatens to have profound impacts on food security. And these are the energy prices. That's the first impact pathway. So Russia is a key player in the global energy market, and it's ranked the 2nd largest oil exporter worldwide. For the first time since 2014, the oil prices exceeded the threshold of $100 per barrel. And of course, this has translated into higher ocean shipping rates and rail freight charges for food commodities. In addition to that, the closure of many parts of the Black Sea, where most of the grain exports from Ukraine are exported, this also have impact on the prices of agricultural commodities. Plus, many countries now are converting agricultural produce into biofuels, which becomes more profitable when the prices of oil goes up. So this presents a challenge for African access to food commodities that are imported. The second impact pathway here is the fertilizers and input prices. Russia is also the world's top producer of natural gas, which presents a major ingredient in the fertilizer industry, particularly the nitrogenous fertilizers such as ammonia and urea. And we have seen that the fertilizers price index has increased significantly during the first quarter of this year compared to the previous year. So if farmers in Africa cannot afford higher fertilizer prices, or they cut use, then this can decrease quality and quantity of harvest at times of declining global stocks and surging global food prices. The third pathway here is related to inflation and the domestic markets. Food price index stood at around 200% in the first quarter of this year. As I mentioned, Africa is a net importer of food. 40% of food is imported. And the high dependency on Russia and Ukraine for wheat imports is a big issue for many countries in the region. The large share of food in, food commodities in general represent a very high share in the expenditure of households. 45% in a country such as Egypt and some North African countries. This goes up to 55% for Nigeria. This implies that increasing international food prices and shortage in food supply in African markets would sharply decrease the purchasing power of the poor households and further exacerbate pre-existing food insecurity challenges. We also know that there is a strong correlation between food price inflation and the headline inflation through inflationary expectations and workers' demands for higher wages. The fourth impact pathway here is related to the sanctions that are imposed on Russia or by Russia on other countries. So these financial measures and trade sanctions that have been and will likely be imposed by NATO and the Western countries on Russia will hamper the ability of the country to export oil and export food and agricultural commodities. This is not only, most of the analysis look at the ability of Russia and Ukraine to export, but very few analyses look into the ability of smallholder farmers and exporters in Africa to export food and agricultural commodity. these restrictions and sanctions that are imposed by each party on the other will also affect the ability of producers and exporters in Africa to export. And this can have a very significant impact on their livelihoods. Now, there are many producers and exporters, North Africa and different parts of Africa, without adequate storage facilities and limited abilities to perform market shifts. So they found themselves with commodities that they could not export, which will have, as I mentioned, adverse effects on their livelihoods and food security. So just to conclude this, the ongoing conflict threatens to have significant impacts on the food systems and subsequently on food security on Africa. This is not the end of the story. The impact of the ongoing conflict on food supply and food price inflation could inflame conflict and destabilize governments. This scenario should not be taken lightly. It's just 7 years when the rise in food insecurity in 2014 across sub-Saharan Africa was attributable to violent conflict. So just my message here is that the efforts of African governments and their development partners and donors should focus on building the productive capacities of African farmers and youth and enhancing their resilience and preparedness to deal with this and future shocks such as the pandemics or ongoing conflicts such as the Russia-Ukrainian war. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Asem, for those painting a realistic picture from an economist lens, and we really appreciate that data and the figure. I need to go back to Dr. Jenna. I did not read your Stockholm Plus 50 quote, so I'll read it together with Asim's, and I'll ask, as I do that, Elizabeth, Tracy, and Jenna to join me on stage for the Q&A. You can come and take your seats. So this is what Dr. Jenna says. Stockholm Plus 50 says it's time for bold choices to ensure healthy planet for prosperity for all. I call on the Swedish government to take the lead and act now by adopting new nationwide legislation mandating the recycling of nutrients from wastewater. I hope they have heard this message. From Asem, he says, we need to enhance the preparedness of food systems to future shocks and potential risks. And this, we should focus on building productive capacities of food system and enhance the resilience to deal with future shocks. Remember, you can post your questions online on our YouTube channel where you're watching from or on the Facebook. We have a Q&A specifically for the online and the people here in person to ask questions. So please note down your questions. And I think I'll ask my first question to Dr. Asim since we still have him online. Realistically, how can the youth build resilience to reconfigure the future of specifically Africa's agriculture and the food system amidst the crisis? And which skills are important for them?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, realistically, you said realistically, so also realistically, Africa's greatest resource, in my view, is its youth, who constitute a significant share of Africa's current and projected future population. So building a sustained and resilient agri-food system in the continent demands the active engagement of African youth. And in order to do that, it's very important to make agriculture attractive, more sexy, and as important also, we need to make it more profitable. So attracting youth into gainful employment in upstream and downstream food systems will involve public investments and policies which facilitate youth access to productive assets such as land, finance, and I think more importantly, digital technology and mechanization. It's also important to create enabling environment to develop their skills and their innovative capacity, which are critical to enhancing their engagement, their effective contribution to building a sustainable and resilient food system. Especially, I think it's very important to restructure higher education and vocational training so that we can address the skill mismatch and enhancing the capacity of low-skilled young people to successfully take advantage of emerging opportunities. We have heard in the two presentations here about these emerging opportunities in the agricultural and food systems. So we need to prepare the youth to be able to take advantage of these opportunities as self-employed service provider or adapters of innovative technologies to promote resilience and productivity. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Kalibata, as a UN Secretary General Special Envoy for the 2021 Food System Summit, you really saw a wider picture than what we can see coordinating the whole summit. What would you say is the part of the agri-food system that you think needs urgent fixing, and how can the youth be more involved?
Thank you. Thank you, Ngendo, and thank you all for all the presentations, very fantastic presentations there. I mean, two things really stand out when I think about what we saw in the Food System Summit. The fact that we called out the critical failures of the food system, whether it was to do with environment, whether it was to do with health and nutrition, and whether it was to do with all the other parts of the system that are not going right. But let me call out two areas like you're saying that I feel would benefit the most from youth engagement, from all of us engaging, but also from youth environment engaging. Number one is environmental degradation. There are three sources of environmental degradation that are extremely important. If you live in Africa like I do, the biggest part of environmental degradation is low productivity. And the fact that farmers that are producing less than they need for their needs end up using more environment. And we need to find the balance between ensuring that farmers have enough, that produce enough to have a meaningful livelihood in farming, while at the same time conserving and ensuring environmental sustainability. And there are a number of things that came out during the Food System Summit that we can look at, whether it is combining regenerative farming, agroecological farming, and other farming practices with ways of intensifying production so that farmers can get more from less. The next part, of course, is saving what we produce. We still have 30 to 40% of the food we produce going into loss and waste. That could be conserved. That actually is more than farmer gains from productivity itself today. So that's the huge opportunity that can be taken advantage of. Then the second component of environmental degradation that is extremely important is environmental degradation that is leading to 30% emissions of the agricultural sector as contribution to climate change. And that comes from incentives that are encouraging people that are doing large-scale farming, doing it the wrong way or doing it in ways that damage the environment. The Food System Summit has recommended that those degrading incentives need to be removed and need to be rethought and need to be rechanneled so that they can be part of transforming the food system. So we hope that this can be addressed, especially in developed economies. The second part, which is extremely important, is degradation of health that needs to be fixed immediately, and where young people again are concerned, whether it is the levels of obesity that we see today, or in many more affluent communities, or whether it is the degradation of health as a result of reduced access to the appropriate levels of nutrition, because everyone in 3 children don't have the right levels of access to nutrition, or whether it is the fact that one in 5 deaths is a result of food-related diseases. So these are things that we can fix. These are things that are affecting young people more than they're affecting the rest of us. And these are things that are within our control. So if there were 2 things that we could fix in the food system, if there were 2 things we would want young people to engage in, again, you're talking about Stockholm plus 50. If you were my age in 1972, you're probably not around here. So in another 50 years, I want to be around, but everybody that is 35 and below is probably going to be around. And the future of these people depends on how we manage those 2 important assets, the environment we work with and the health of our people. So that's how I would look at it from a food system perspective.
Thank you. So environmental degradation and health and nutrition, this is where the youth can get involved. So Elizabeth, maybe you can give us concrete examples. You did mention in your welcoming remarks how EFF is supporting the young people. Maybe you can give us solid examples on how you're enabling capacity of these young people, and especially in this looming food crisis.
Yeah, thank you. Let me start from the overall mandate of the organization as the voice of all farmers in Eastern Africa region, that is East Africa and the Horn of Africa. And by saying such, it means that we represent the different categories of farmers, the youth, the women, the men, all in other sectors. Every sector is represented. And our strategy is anchored around commercialization, where we are looking at smallholder farmers, transforming smallholder agriculture as an investment opportunity. And we are doing that by identifying the different opportunities for different categories of farmers. I did mention that we conducted scoping studies to identify the available opportunities for the youth within the region. Because one of the key challenges that youth face is lack of information on some of these available opportunities. For example, the financing opportunities that support the different value chains. So by doing that, we've been able to identify those opportunities and then support the youth and link them and build their capacity on some of these opportunities in agro-processing, for example, being able to transform, let's say, milk into yogurt, transform the bananas into juices and wines. I actually forgot to mention that I grow bananas and coffee, and I also produce banana wine. Banana wine. Yes. And then also, next time. And also being able to put, for example, waste into good management and produce like briquettes. Then the other issue has been that we all know that most of the youth agribusinesses don't usually live to celebrate their second birthdays. So we've been trying to see how we can build the capacity of the youth agribusinesses to be sustainable. We have so far trained over 12,000 youth under the Rural Youth in Agribusiness financing program, where we've also mobilized over $1.7 million worth of investments to some of the youth agribusinesses in the region. And we've traded more than 2 million tons of produce from the youth agripreneurs within the region. In terms of access to financing, there's available financing at county level. Actually, in most of our countries, there are so many programs that have been put together by government to support youth. There are so many programs within the banking sector, the different foundations, but most of our youth don't really get the opportunity to tap into those programs. So what we do as a federation is to identify some of those opportunities, and we are able to link some of the programs, the youth programs, with those opportunities. For example, under KCB Foundation, you come from Kenya, and my sister comes from Kenya. We've been able to enter into partnership where 13 of our youth projects under rural financing have been supported by KCB Foundation. But also we have a financing agreement with Vision Fund, where it has extended support to most of our farmers under a bundled service. Farmers are able to access inputs and support for access to inputs, including seed and fertilizer. And then also linking them with those available government programs by making sure we support them to come up with investor-ready proposals that can pitch to those government programs. Still on the information level, I mentioned about the AYA platform, which is the Africa Youth in Agribusiness platform. I think you can Google that, and you can as well register to be part of that platform, where we are able to share information on available opportunities, but then youth can also interact with their fellow youth on that platform, be able to exploit opportunities that are available within the sector. So it provides them an opportunity to engage with other actors in the region and in agribusiness. Given an opportunity, I will share more. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you for that expansive answer. And over to you, Tracy. We've heard about access to finance and how we can enable young people. But when I was younger and I would go for a meeting, maybe a county meeting with my mom, it would be, and I was a teenager, not so long ago. I was just there to be seen and not to be heard. Should be like, I'm the one to ask the questions, you just sit there. It's the old people who know. So my question to you is, are you involved in policy making and do you feel like your voice is being heard?
Yeah. Thank you for the question, Ngendo. Yes, you were once a teenager, shortly. Yeah, I mean, youths, especially in Africa, we do constitute the majority of the population, but we are the least heard. If you look at majority, positions, they are held by non-youths. So it is hard to see a transfer of responsibility within generations, and that's, I think, something that people are working on, whether that's in private sectors or in government. Yeah, so we have collaborated a lot with organizations like UNEP through something like AWIF, the African Women's Entrepreneurship in Environmental Framework. What happens is they do give youths a chance to come and speak and say, this is the problems that we are facing, this is what we think should be changed, and beautiful policies are written on the same. The problem comes with the implementation of these policies. So we have a beautiful, agent within our government that's specifically for youths. Is it funded? No. Is it being implemented? No. So youths are involved in policy making 100%. They are divisions in the government, in the private sector that involves youths. Are they implemented? That's another story for another day. So as much as, there's a lot of informal employment that are being held by the youths, not much of them are formal. And although informal discussions are had by the youths and even formal ones, there's a lot of implementation gaps that are needed to be met. And I think that's what I need to say about policies. But they are, again, very nice organizations or frameworks that actually come with the youth, introduce them to conferences like this. And for us on our end, whenever we're listened to, we try and employ as many youths within, I guess you can say, white-collar jobs. We try and fundraise as much as possible, and actually 90% of our employees are youths, and they work faster, they work harder. Why these policies are being listened to and not implemented, I cannot say, but hopefully these organizations will come out and actually give out to their promises on youth development in Africa. One other thing, somebody says people need to make agriculture sexy. So that's something else that's really interesting. We need to make, in order to have more youths involved within the agricultural sector, right now what you see is a lot of youths take something called a djembe and start digging. So if you're introduced to agriculture as a manual labor, nobody wants to go into that direction. If you introduce more tech-driven, and again, I'm not really into innovation, something like a tractor. If you tell a youth, instead of digging, maybe we can give you a tractor, more youths would go into the space of policies and agricultural development if you introduce tech into it, if you introduce white-collar positions into it. But currently, a youth involved in agriculture is them taking an axe and digging, and nobody wants to do that. Thank you.
A challenge to us all, how to make agriculture sexy for the youth. I'll pose the same question to Jenna. Are you involved in policy making, and is your voice being heard?
So I'm not directly involved. I'm an engineer. I don't go into that, but I'm lucky to be part of the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, and within our department we have active people who are directly working with policymakers. And I can say that in the last 2 years, there's been an increase in opportunities for our voice to be heard and our message to be heard. And it's the same thing. We develop beautiful policies, I like that, and we suggest things and we work with other policy makers, and it's heard, but there's no action at all. And in the sanitation sector, we also struggle with attracting people into it. We're, I think, even less sexy than agriculture, who it takes a special character to want to work with pee and poo. And so I agree with you that we need, the more tech there is, the more hands-off in terms of the actual direct labor, but having the more computer tech and a distance from it, then the easier it is to engage people. So that's part of why I said with my call to action that we need the Swedish government to actually take a step and be a leader in this environmental policy and put in legislation to mandate that we have to recycle the nutrients from our wastewater.
Yeah, I mean, if youth are involved in more value addition, that may be attractive to them. For example, if I was 13, I mean, it's 18, 19, 20, and told me I could make banana wine, I would be right there doing that. You know, not telling me to go to the farm and using a hoe and start digging. That is not attractive to me. So I get what you're saying. I told you I'm on the border of youth and crossing over to the other side. And profitability, making money, right? If it makes money, it makes sense, right? Anyway, let me not get too passionate. I'm just a moderator. I'm not on the panel. I'll cross over to Asem. Just one question to you. In the long run, do you see these shocks that we're experiencing now, would they open up new business opportunities for young people?
Yeah, I think we have two great examples from the speakers. Sorry, I don't recall the names, who both indicated that the COVID-19 pandemic has offered opportunities for their businesses. The classical economics theory views risk or shocks as a possibility of economic or financial loss or gains. I mean, so in other words, this particular shock, the ongoing war or the global food crisis, not only, I mean, have adverse effects, but it could also generate positive spillover effects for young people and businesses in Africa and elsewhere. For example, we have conducted research which shows that the pandemic created opportunities for farmers and youth in the local markets in Africa by, for example, excluding competitors from the regions where they are operating due to the mobility restrictions, but also by facilitating their access to government support program and financial services from banks. Other opportunities also emerged indirectly from the implementation of the coping strategies that led to organizational innovation and new competitive advantage, including, for example, the adoption of new operational strategies to diversify products or to penetrate new markets, especially for small and medium-sized enterprises, but also the adoption of ICT and also using digital platforms for marketing products and so on. So I think the opportunities are always there, but it's very important to be able and to be prepared to actually use these opportunities that are offered. And I think we should not fail to see the current global food crisis as an opportunity to build more sustainable and resilient food system and to use it as an opportunity to engage youth more effectively in food supply chains in Africa.
Thank you. Dr. Kalibata, we've talked about having a coordinated response in order to build the resilience of these young people. And we are lucky to be hosted at SIDA. And my question is, what do you think is the role of the donor community, and do we see sufficient action and a well-coordinated response from these actors?
Thank you for the question. Maybe I link it to the earlier point that one of the panelists made around inaction coming from governments and the lack of action. So that is a very serious challenge. It's not my experience here working at Agri is that inaction is something that is extremely common, and it's a major problem. It's not just that people are sitting down on youth-related issues, and they're acting on other things. So what we've decided to do, the institution I work for, Agro, we decided to step back and ask ourselves, why are we having these challenges of inaction when it comes to moving forward programs in government that actually would change the lives of farmers? Because we do know that agriculture has been used to change livelihoods and economies, in fact, across the world in nearly every global economy that is huge. So why has Africa failed to do that? And a lot of it sits in the inaction and the inability to be able to move certain areas that are very critical, low capacities in the government, and also the inability to the fact that we are not significantly funding the research and innovation. I mean, in Africa, research institutions receive less than 1% of funding. Completely, many of them are completely unfunded. Extension is not funded. So when these things are not funded, it's very difficult to get an action going forward in anything. It's very difficult to use data and information to know how to move things forward. It's very difficult to understand that 77% of the people are sitting not having jobs, and yet they are your biggest opportunity to invest in them. So what would donors and governments do? Strengthening and finding ways to strengthen and support governments to be able to really have better analytical capabilities and better research capacity so that they understand what is going on. I'm just surprised that ASEAN is making a presentation on Africa. Was like, maybe we couldn't find an African scientist or researcher that could provide an African perspective on this. I'm just joking, but that's really part of the problem, that we are not investing enough in research, we are not investing enough in understanding the global challenges we live with. So let's focus on supporting institutions in African countries to be able to be on top of their game. Let's focus on helping governments understand how to move things forward, what is critical to move forward, what policies should be moving when. But more importantly, when it comes to donors, let's coordinate better. Let's ensure that the efforts that are being put on the ground are transformative. There's so much, like you said in Gendo, there's so much on the ground here. I think one of the other panelists said it as well. There's so much resources on the ground here, but the level of coordination is lacking, and yet it is a principle that we agreed on. And this completely takes away from the ability of us being able to leverage on each other's strength and being able to take things forward. So I think that strengthening and finding weaknesses in public institutions that are supposed to be delivering the game-changing solutions that the young entrepreneur that presented here is looking for, and being able to coordinate better and ensuring that we really are presenting and understanding the critical areas that need to be moved forward first, priorities, and working with governments to move them forward as we support them, or even working with private sector. I think the last point I want to make when it comes to youth is and investment in private sector is ensuring that we provide opportunities for youth to be part of the game, not to bypass the youth. I also see that private sector investments can be misunderstood or can fail to take advantage of youth opportunities rather than building on them, using it as an opportunity to transfer skills and using it as an opportunity to grow that landscape. So fund the private sector, fund the governments, but find the pain points that are impacting you and ensure that we are coordinating better around them.
Okay, thank you for that response. And maybe just one final question from me before we move to the floor and online, if we have some questions, is to Jenna. I mean, if urine has such great potential as a fertilizer, why are we not using it? If we already have it and it's there, why are we not using it as a fertilizer?
Great question. So we don't have to actually go back in time that far. to a time even in Stockholm where we were using our excreta as a fertilizer because we saw the value and it was quite effective. We transitioned away from using what we call human manure for three things. One, we made the discovery of disease, and so we realized we needed to separate ourselves. Two, as cities grew, like Stockholm, the mass of excreta was piling up and it became more difficult to effectively get it from the cities back to the agricultural fields, and so they put in sewered networks. So not even that long ago, we had buckets that had to be transported out, then we got sewers, and then that made it that we used a water-based transport system, and the fertilizer was not accessible anymore. It was just dumped right into the water bodies. And then third was the green revolution and the making synthetic fertilizers, especially nitrogen. So urine, it contains about 0.6% nitrogen compared to ammonium nitrate that has 34% nitrate, or 34% nitrogen. So you can imagine the ease of using a synthetic fertilizer versus a urine fertilizer, and also the smell is a lot more pleasant with the synthetic made ones. So that's why we need innovations. We don't want to go back to defecating, urinating in buckets and transporting that. It's also not effective. We can't transport it in an economic manner. So that's where our work to remove the water, produce a dry concentrated fertilizer where the nitrogen content is over 10%. And there's other innovations that are also working at how to concentrate these nutrients and make it more effective. And so I'm quite optimistic about the future that urine and feces will become a mainstream fertilizer if we have the support.
Okay. We are open for questions from the floor, and I believe we have a roaming mic. I already see a few hands up. My beautiful colleague, Anneli, you have some online questions. Okay. We can take some from the floor and some from online, and then we can get, and please make sure you introduce yourself, mention who the question is directed to so that you can get an effective answer.
Thank you. My name is Priscilla. I'm from Diaconia, Environment and Climate Change Advisor. And my question is open to any of the panelists, is that I believe that youth has an important role for innovation, for facing challenges and breaking some rules and norms and structures that exist and making things differently. But at the same time, I can see that many times we're not heard. We are said that we had not enough experience on that, or we don't know how to do that. So my question is, how, from your experience, how should youth challenge these things and make things differently? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Tracy?
Great question. So lack of experience is definitely something that I've dealt with personally. So failure is a good thing. These days we have something called failure capital, where a company led by youth get to explore, different business models, and whichever works, you kind of go with that. But I do understand the fact that, we're new, we don't want that. Another good thing is transfer of knowledge from one generation to another. That tends to help a lot. But again, in Africa, there tends to be that competition where somebody older doesn't want to pass their information to somebody younger because of competitive reasons. Another thing is collaboration. So if an older company collaborates with a newer company, I tend to see that works a lot. So yeah, those are my three things. Just allow failure to happen, have failure capital, and then transfer of knowledge between companies and older generations to younger generations. Yeah.
You feel sufficiently answered? Okay. Next question.
Yes, Andreas from LM International. A question on legislation and approval of human waste and how that is happening. I think that's a big problem of not moving forward in many countries. So what is happening from your experience, and what can we do more to have that one solved? And also, of course, we know just making use of human waste in agriculture, the perception about it. But maybe you can shed some light about this sexy topic.
Jenna, I think that's just for you.
That is a spot-on question. Just yesterday, I submitted a 4 million kroner grant application to Formas to help us investigate certifications, because right now there's no applicable or ideal certification for us and other emerging products, and this needs to change. And so what needs to happen is we need to have environmental aspects included in certifications, which currently are not existent, the ones that are run by RISE or REVAC. And two, we need something that is functioning in Sweden, but then acts as a model for other countries. Because right now in Sweden, we're allowed to use urine fertilizer without any extra approval. There's certain regulations that you have to follow, but we are allowed to use it. The rest of Europe, we're not allowed. So each country would have to apply individually in order to be able to do this. Change is coming at an EU level. They're about to make struvite, which is a slow-release phosphorus fertilizer, from wastewater as certified organic, which is an incredible step forward, but it is slow. And our product doesn't fall under that, so then we're not covered. And then if we go out of Europe, then it's the same thing. There's so many hurdles in order to be able to do it. So we need this certification. I really hope that Formas is maybe listening and going to fund us so that we can move forward with this, and it will help to scale up, not just our company, but everyone else who's trying to do this. Great question. Thank you.
Yeah. We can take a question from online. Yes.
Yeah. So we have actually two questions in one. One from Linda Hansson at Gothenburg University and one from Joachim Orti around what the two young entrepreneurs and agripreneurs, what they say have been the key factors that have enabled the building of the companies and the success of their companies. What are the main reasons to make these innovations possible?
I'll give each speaker 1 minute before we wrap it up.
Yes, okay. So key factors for success, I'll just repeat myself. So for us, again, when we started, we were doing something different. So pivoting, yeah? So accepting that a business model is not successful and then pivoting into something that might make more sense is also something key. So again, I talk about failure capital, enabling that and normalizing failure, but then not just normalizing failure, but then saying, what did you learn from failure? And then how can you make it profitable? Or what else can you add onto it so that it kind of makes sense? And another thing, back to the audience question, is when we started, we didn't know how to assemble complex solar cold chain infrastructure. So what we did is we partnered with two different older companies who know how to do that and collaborate. So also enabling a collaborative environment within this tech spaces where a young entrepreneur says, okay, I don't know how to do this, so I'll just hire people who do know how to do it. Or rather, instead of having a team that does it, just hiring a different company that does that. That's something that helped. So again, the fact that we were allowed to fail and then pivot was a critical success story for us. And then number two, enabling other companies to kind of work for us who have more knowledge on the sector. Yeah, thanks.
In terms of for us at Sanitation 360, we're a spin-off from the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, and that was, we have invested over 15 million crowns in terms of research funds in developing this, and Sweden is unique. As a researcher, I own my IP, my intellectual property, and I'm allowed to start a company without having to have SLU being the overlord on it. This is very unique. It's not like this in the rest of the world. And so they even have a company called SLU Holding that gave us soft money to actually kickstart that. So I think Sweden is quite unique in creating these ecosystems or communities to support that. And now I'm based on Gotland, where there's even more state soft funding that want to see youth prosper. And especially on Gotland, we want to keep our economy going so that it can stay as a viable community as well. And so I think the Swedish government in that way is doing really well in supporting the youth and providing support.
So I'll speak at my cooperative level. And the product Tida Wines, the success factor has been on two reasons. One is on the profitability of the enterprise, and the second one is on the power of numbers. So on the profitability aspect is looking at the cost vis-a-vis what we get out of the enterprise. I'll give you an example. I come from a banana growing region where one bunch of banana, if put on the market, the highest you can get is $10 US. That is the highest you can get. And during the off-peak season, you can get as low as 0.3 of a US dollar. But when you add value, the same bunch that would fetch you $10 US, you're able to get a net profit of over $150 US from the same bunch. So that makes the mathematics. And then on the issue of numbers, because we come together as the cooperative, then we are able to aggregate our production inputs, the raw materials that are required, but also we are able to aggregate the ideas and the resources that are needed to invest into the enterprise. But also at the federation level, the Eastern Africa Farmers Federation, in terms of success, is that with the numbers, everyone is able to listen to us. If I was not representing the federation, I don't think I would be here speaking on behalf of the farmers. But because we have that mandate given to us by the smallholder farmers, then every actor in the agriculture sector is able to listen to us as a voice representing farmers and the youth.
Super. I can't add anything. I can't remove anything. Let's give them a round of applause. Well done. Thank you. You can head back to your seats. Now I'll invite Mats to come and give a vote of thanks. He works at SIDA as a senior program manager in the unit for globally sustainable economic development. Welcome, Mats.
Thanks a lot, Njendo. And it's a pleasure to do this, to be invited, even though I'm not one of the younger persons here in the room, but still representing SIDA here. And I think this has been a very interesting, very energetic session we have had starting this day at SIDA. And I've heard many words, but I would like to focus on 3 words that I've heard. I mean, I'm not at all going to try to recap the whole morning session here, but I've heard access, which is obvious: access to finance, access to land tenure will be talked about later on. We have talked about ICT, internet, the necessity of having access to that, to have agriculture flourishing under youth leadership. But we also talked about access to knowledge, access to capacity. And here I would like to mention one of the co-organizers, Agribusiness, who works very much in that arena. And I mean, you could go back to the web after this session to see on the various organizations, but focusing on how to build capacity from researcher, from students, profiting the good policy development and the good development for the farming community. Also, another piece of knowledge that I tend to go back to is the IFA, the Rural Development Report from 2019, a thick Bible of knowledge, very useful if you would like to have figures on anything. There are many more things one need to have access to, but I stop there. Next word is participation. And we have heard about the necessity of all groups, all relevant groups participating in the processes. Talk about women, talk about indigenous people, obviously youth. And we have had representative from the Farmers Federation, which is also important voice in expressing the needs. And also this title of this session, it's like the SDG, it's applicable to all countries in the world. Even in Sweden, we have got a setting up scheme for younger farmers, a person under 40. If he or she is young, then I don't know, but according to the Swedish authority, they are. Then, of course, the Food System Summit has been mentioned, which was then facilitated in a magnificent way by Agnes, present here today, and where SIDA also took a part in the funding and in the discussions, which is a way we need to following that momentum and keep using it for future good development. Also now, unfortunately, what was highlighted, the present crisis also brings food security, food system, agriculture to the arena, unfortunately more than we would have wanted, or for reasons we wouldn't have wanted. Also, CFS, Committee on Food Security, you might know the existence of, and they should this autumn take a decision on a paper on youth, and focusing on 5 bullet points there. And I think there are now discussions going on, negotiations leading up to hopefully a good document that will continue this discussion. Third and last word is sustainability. Obviously, this is a key word for everyone. It has got various connotations. We have heard the very interesting work on solar energy, which would then has an important role in creating a bigger sustainability, on having the loops on nutrients being reconnected, very important. We heard it in the human connection. Obviously, it's important in other connections with farm manure and other residues that shouldn't be seen as a pollutant, as a residue, but as something of great value. Also, we have talked about resilience, having systems that can cope not only in relation to climate, but also on using the diversity for a stronger sustainability. And of course, there are various ways that are proposed out there for achieving all this: agroecology, conservation agriculture, climate smart agriculture, organic farming, etc., etc. And I think we need to learn from all of them where adequate for achieving this. So these were my 3 words that I took with me from this morning session. And then if you want to go back, you can stream it once again to listen to the insights. So now, by closing this, I would like to thank our co-organizers, the SIANI team, Ebba, Madeleine, Marika, the Agribusiness team, Anneli, Agnes, Sofia, Ivar, and our magnificent moderator, and Jenna. But also, of course, thanking all the keynote speakers and the panelists, Agnes, Elizabeth, Tracy, Jenna, SM, and I propose we close this with a big hand to all involved.
Thank you so much, Mats. Thank you for being a fantastic audience. This is the best audience that I've seen so far in my life, in my very short life. So give yourselves a round of applause. And now handing over to our super organizer, Maria, to give us a few notes for the day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ngendo. It's wonderful to... I've co-moderated with Ngendo, and that's a pleasure. So I also want to thank all the speakers and organizers for this first very engaging session. And you provided a lot of challenges where we need to step up action as well. My name is Maria Öland, and I'm the project manager of the Focali Research Network and the Focali SIANI collaboration. And I'm co-leading the planning of this day together with this great team for these 3 events with Emma and others. So, and I'm here now because you're hungry. You want to know where the food is, what we will eat. And to also encourage you to, we plan this day not only for these 3 events, but also because so many are traveling in here and there's so many great opportunities to network, to sow seeds of new collaborations, to water existing partnerships. And you can do this over lunch. So outside here, there's lunch, vegan wraps and gluten-free salads, coffee. There's a network area downstairs where you can mingle. There are toilets on both floors. Yes, so this is one of the aims that we should really develop the partnerships. And if there's anyone that really need to or want to have a deeper sort of partnership meeting, we also have rooms booked for this. We have 3 rooms where you can have meetings, deeper conversations, and then you connect with either Emma or Madeleine Jönsson in the back with the cards that can open these rooms for you. So with this, I thank all involved in the first event, and it would be great if we can gather at about 1:10 for the next event, starting 1:15 those that will join us in the afternoon. Thank you.